For example, how easy would it be to trust someone to fulfill a request with lots of cash on the line, or to keep an important secret when they talked about how much they wanted money every day? Would it be possible to sleep in the same room with someone who was always saying how badly they desired the other sex? Teammates covered one another's backs in situations where their lives were in danger. They had to maintain a minimum level of trust. Being in some kind of obvious trouble dealt a serious blow to Arch's dependability. This wasn't an issue they could simply compromise on. They were risking their lives together, so they couldn't let even a little uncertainty remain. Irritated, Hecarim furiously scratched his head. He didn't forget to wear this suck's face. I guess there's no helping it. Someone has to ask her. Thank Yao. He gave Amina a deadpan stare as she smiled and waved. What? Trying to run away? Yurei asking her with me. What? She grimaced, but gave up when she saw that Hecarim's expression didn't crack a bit. Fine, I hope it's not too depressing. Where did she go anyway? Oh, she is investigating that job. Aaron T. Robber and I supposed to be doing that. They had returned to the Imperial capital and were resting after finishing a round of undead extermination on the Katsi plain when a new request appeared. The terms weren't bad, so they were leaning toward accepting it. The plan was for Robadick, the best speaker of their group, to look into the background of the requester as well as the nature of the job. Hecarim would drop by the Imperial Government Office to pick up the reward for the undead extermination, a state undertaking, and then investigate the same things as Robadick, using different sources. Amina and Arch were supposed to be on standby at the inn. It's not just that, though. We also need information like the history of the region and current conditions in the location's vicinity. Hecarim nodded that he understood. Arch may have dropped out of the Imperial Magic Academy, but she still had some connections. She would be best at collecting academic knowledge. Maybe she was digging through documents at the Wizards Guild. That's why she said she'd look into things with Robber. He has a fair amount of knowledge himself, plus shrine connections, you know. So what did you find out then? About that, said Hecarim as he sat down. Then he lowered his voice. I can see why they were hiring workers. Or at least, based on the location, it'd be impossible to hire adventurers. But in the requester mentioned this, too. It does seem to be true that they were talking to other teams as well. So it's actually a joint job. The requester must be expecting quite a return considering no one has ever set foot in these ruins. Gringham's team got the request, and he was saying the same thing. Heavy Masha seems to be thinking of going. We have to decide what we were doing by tomorrow too. Hecarim's team only received the request and had yet to accept. They had until the next day to give their response, but if they were going to go, they had all sorts of preparations to make. And then this trouble comes up right when all this is going on. I wonder if it's related. I can say for sure other teams aren't scheming because they think they can make a killing with this job, but we should talk to Arch first. If one of the other teams is giving her grief, we should either leave the job or be ready for a fight. We should fight though, right? If someone tries to start something with us, we should beat them until all their teeth are chipped away so they never do it again. That seems excessive. Amina was more cutthroat than she looked, but Hecarim didn't think her proposal was a bad idea. If they were underestimated, he wouldn't say their careers were over, but people would definitely think less of them. That was something workers, with one foot in the underworld, had to avoid. When he silently nodded with a hard glint in his eye, a creak echoed through the pub. Two figures entered through the wide-open door. Hey, we ray back, a woman's faint voice. And a moment later, so as not to talk over her, the voice of a well-mannered man came as well. The first to enter was a skinny woman. She might still be considered a girl. She was probably in her mid to late teens. Her glossy hair was cropped to shoulder length. She had a very pretty face. She wasn't a bombshell. She was an elegant beauty. There was something almost inorganic about her. She looked doll-like. She carried an iron rod that was longer than she was tall. Numerous letters or symbols were inscribed on it. She wore a loose-fitting robe. Beneath it, she had thick clothes that gave her some protection. This look made it clear she was a caster. The man was clad in full plate armor. He didn't wear a close helmet. Over the armor, he wore a surcoat decorated with a sigil. A morning star was slung from his hip. From his neck hung the same sigil featured on his surcoat. The outline of his face was rugged. His short hair and well-trimmed beard gave him a clean-cut appearance. He looked to be around 30 years old. These were Hecarin's other teammates Arch Ebril Furt and Robodick Goltron. "Oh, welcome back," Hecarin replied stiffly. "Is this good timing or horrible? Is something the matter, you two?" Robodick spoke in a politer tone than you might expect from the oldest member of the group. This came from his personality, but also because they were equals as workers. "No, nothing, that's right," like he said. Arch and Robodick squinted at Hecarin and Emina, flapping their hands. Well, it's awkward to talk here. How about we go over there?" Cutting to the chase with an earnest expression, Hecarin pointed at a round table in the back of the pub. "Before that, drinks." "Hey, Emina, where's the innkeeper?" Emina's expression seemed to say, "You're finally asking, shopping, so I am watching the place for him." "Seriously? Then what should we do? Just drink? I am fine without." "Yeah, me too." "Okay then, well, shall we start our meeting, Foresight?" With that, everyone erased all traces of their previous expressions. They leaned in around the table, bringing their faces closer together. Talking in this conspiratorial manner, even when no one else was around, was like an occupational disease. "First, let us review the content of the request," Hecarin continued, after confirming all eyes were on him. His tone was completely different from the one he'd used until this moment. When it was time to get down to business, he got serious, as was only natural for a leader. "The request of this time is Count Vermeer. The request is to survey some ruins in Kingdom territory. It's a large building, possibly a tomb that extends underground. The reward is 200 in advance and 150 after. It's rare for a contract to have such a large advance. The amount overall is also pretty big. There could be additional compensation depending on the outcome of the survey. However, all magic items discovered go to the Count. He'll allow the ones who found them to sell to him at half the market rate. Jewels, precious metals, and works of art will be split 50-50 after determining their worth. He has been talking to other teams as well, and may hire more than one, this we've confirmed." Hecarin filled Arch and Robodick in on what he'd heard, and then returned to reviewing the content of the request. The survey will be 3 days at the longest. The assignment is to examine the ruins from various angles. He thinks there are monsters there and wants to know what types and so on. It's a fairly standard ruins investigation. He said it was quite common for monsters to nest in deserted cities and ruins. For that reason, worker team surveys were usually more like reconnaissance missions, but there was one major difference. This tomb has yet to be discovered. The moment he said it, the atmosphere changed. 200 years previously, a number of countries were destroyed when evil spirits went on a rampage. These weren't only human countries, but also countries of subhuman and grotesque creatures. Sometimes, extraordinary treasures, usually magic items, were sleeping in their ruins. Discovering these treasures was the dream of any adventurer or worker. That's why they all sought ruins that no one had ever looted. Foresight's chance was right in front of them. The Count will provide transportation to and from the ruins. He will also provide food for the duration of the investigation. "I think that's it. Arch, Robodick, let us hear your report." He noticed the gleams in his teammates' eyes and passed the ball to the two who had been gathering intelligence, starting with Arch. "Then I'll go first. Count Vermeer's position at court isn't great. There was a rumor that the Fresh Blood Emperor treats him coldly. I also heard that he's not hard up for money. We were supposed to survey these ruins in Kingdom territory, but Arch and I both looked and couldn't find any rumors of ruins in that area. We also couldn't find any indication that there was a city there in the past. If there really is a tomb there, it wouldn't be strange for some information to have been left behind. But honestly, it doesn't even make sense for it to exist. Geographically, all that's over there is a little village. If we ask around the village, we might be able to learn something, but we can't do that. We were supposed to keep this under wraps as much as possible. He did say we don't need to do anything to anyone who sees us, and that he'd rather we didn't. That makes sense. The area is directly under Kingdom jurisdiction. One wrong step, and we could make enemies of the Vaisel family and the whole country. It was practically a crime to survey ruins in another country's territory, which is why this request had come to workers, not adventurers. So it's just a typical dirty job. "Yeah, but there is that one little problem," said Robodick. "Well, yeah. If workers from the Empire got rowdy in the kingdom, there would be all kinds of issues. If we were not careful, an incident might be traced back to the Count. In that case, there's one question. You mean where the tip about the ruins came from? Yeah, it's weird no matter how you look at it. Really, it's near the Tove Woodlands, right? Couldn't it have just been discovered while clearing the forest? Now that doesn't make sense. Look at this. Arch spread out a map and drew a circle around one location. I don't know the details, but supposedly it's around here. She moved her small finger and tapped. And here there's a village, but it's pretty small, more like a hamlet. I highly doubt the people in that village have the resources to clear the forest. You're right. Clearing the dangerous woodlands would be nearly impossible for such a small village. It could be that the kingdom undertook clearing the forest as a state project, but location-wise I can imagine why they'd be so interested. And there's no information about a project like that. The four of them racked their brains. Should they really take this job? Because they didn't have the support of an organization like the Adventurers Guild, they needed to scrutinize the details of each job. First, they looked into the background of the requester. Then they researched the location. Only after examining the content of the request would they finally take the job. Even after being so thorough, they often ran into trouble. Workers risked their lives on their work. No matter how much they investigated, it would never feel like enough. They couldn't stay in the business unless they were thorough. If a job seemed too dangerous for them to handle, they had to leave the offer on the table, no matter how good the terms were. When I confirmed about the payment, he gave me the advance. Hecarim set a gold plate on the table. It was inscribed with lots of little letters. If they refused the job, they had to give it back. I checked the gold ticket at the bank, and the full amount has been paid. We can cash it at any time. Gold tickets, managed by the Empire and guaranteed by the bank, were like checks. The downsides were that to make them hard to counterfeit, they were quite elaborate and took time to prepare. There was also a fee involved, but the benefits were innumerable. In nearby countries, it was usually the Adventurers Guild that did this work, but in the Empire, the tickets were backed by the state. So it's not a trap. Well, I figure we can assume they were serious if they've given us a gold ticket. If it was a trap, there would have been no need to pay such a high advance. Of course, it could have been a ploy to make them think that and lower their guard. But Hecarim couldn't think of a reason a noble he'd never even met would have something against him. I think, wait, Emina, I am not finished. I want you to keep your mind a little more open. Sure, then tell me there are a few things I don't understand, even for a rush job. For example, why is he hiring multiple teams? It was just as Emina said. Considering the time it would take to contact everyone, it was strange to hire multiple teams if he was in a hurry. Not sure. I don't know why it's a rush job in the first place. I haven't heard anything about any of his associates having some sort of emergency, and it's not like there's a ceremony or anything coming up in a few days. If anything, I imagine he's worried the kingdom will discover the ruins. And hiring more teams yields a better chance of success. Hey Hecarim, did Gringham's team have any ideas? You think he would tell me if they did? Plus, I had my hands full trying not to leak any of the information we'd acquired while asking him if he'd been contacted. Hecarim shrugged, as if saying he didn't know what else he could have done. It could be that the Count has a rival. That is a possibility. That would explain the rush and the large number of workers. Oh, right. Something big happened in the kingdom recently. Not that it seems to have anything to do with these ruins in the Rantle area. Tell us anyhow. Robber, after prefacing his report with I didn't really get much on it, and it's basically a rumor, Robber Dick gave an uncertain description of the huge incident that had occurred in the royal capital. He said he would need more time to be able to say anything further, but sure enough, as it stood, it was a rather unreliable, fractured account. It might be related, but it might not be. For now, Arch's idea seems the most plausible, and you agreed, Robber. If we make that assumption, then considering the multiple teams and the fact that it's a job in Kingdom territory, it's possible that we LLB up against Kingdom adventurers. They LLB there by official request. We wouldn't be able to find that out just by asking around in the Empire. The other thing we have to watch out for is a team requested by someone else, a hidden threat. I don't want to get my head cut off in my sleep right when we think we've accomplished our goal. Are adventurers a threat? They ray better than the alternative. At least with adventurers you can negotiate, and it won't get ugly. If it's workers, people will die. What do you think, boss? Nothing had been left unsaid. All they could do now was speculate and make predictions. Before we decide, there's one thing I need to say. Well, ask, I guess. Hecarim heaved a sigh, and Amina quietly held her breath. Arch, there was a weird guy here to see you. Arch's almost artificial-looking expression contained barely any emotion, but now her eyebrows twitched. From that reaction, Hecarim gathered that she knew who it was. When he left, he said, what did he say? When he turned to Amina, he was met with a what are you talking about, look. But then she realized he really couldn't remember and said in an exhausted voice, he said, tell the furt girl that her time is up. Yeah, that's it. Everyone's eyes turned to Arch. She took a breath and spoke reluctantly. I am in debt. In debt, Hecarim yelped in spite of himself. Naturally, he wasn't the only one in shock. Amina and Robadick also looked surprised. They all knew how much each member made as workers because they split their rewards evenly. With that much going into their pockets, debt was inconceivable. How much? 300 gold. The others exchanged glances again. In terms of an ordinary salary, it was an outrageous amount. Even as workers of their caliber, it was impossible to earn that in one job. Yes, the total for this job would come out to 350, but that was the reward for the entire team. From there, necessary expenses would be deducted. These included communally used consumables and other team-based spending. In the end, they would each get about 60. Their team was fairly elite as worker teams went. In adventurer terms, they had ability equal to a mithril-ranked team. How had she managed to go so far into debt that even at their class she couldn't pay it off in one job? Arch probably sensed all their puzzled eyes. Her face was gloomy. Of course, she didn't want to talk about it, but she couldn't not. If she cut off the conversation here, it wouldn't be surprising for her to be kicked off the team. Perhaps realizing that, she finally spoke again. I couldn't tell you because it's humiliating for my family. We were stripped of our noble status by the Fresh-Blood Emperor. The Fresh-Blood Emperor was Jerkniv Rune Farlord El Nix. As the sobriquet implied, he was an emperor whose hands were stained with blood. He assumed the throne directly after mourning his father, the previous emperor, who died in a freak accident. Immediately following the emperor's death, he broke off relations with one of the 5 great noble families, his mother's family, because he suspected they assassinated the emperor. He then consigned each of his siblings to oblivion one by one. Around that time, his mother also died in an accident, as if carried away on the winds of death that raged across the land. There was opposition, of course, but they were no match for the then crown prince, who had the force of the knights at his disposal. With that overwhelming military power, he cleaned up the nobles, as if he were reaping ears of wheat, until only the ones who sincerely or not swore loyalty to the emperor remained. His assumption of absolute centralized rule was then complete, but the Fresh-Blood Emperor didn't stop there. He stripped many nobles of their status, saying, we don't need any useless people. Instead, he promoted anyone with ability, including commoners, further solidifying his authority. 2 things about this astounded everyone. One thing was that the cleanup of opposing nobles, carried out on an impossible scale, was done with such inspired efficiency that it didn't decrease the nation's power. Another thing was that the emperor who achieved it was still a young teenager. It wasn't hard to find nobles who had been ruined by this man. But the thing is, my parents are still living as if they were nobles. Of course, they don't have the money for that. So they were borrowing from a nasty guy to make up the difference. The other 3 looked at one another. They were doing a good job hiding it, but it was still possible to detect their irritation, displeasure, and anger. I am a good caster, a skinny kid holding a staff taller than she had said. I want to join you. Hecarim wasn't the only one recalling how stunned they'd been back then and how dumbfounded when they found out what she could do. Since then, over 2 years of adventure after adventure, where one wrong step would have meant death, it seemed like her gear had barely changed at all. Now they finally knew why. Are you serious? Do you want me to give them a real talking to? We should teach them the words of the gods. Or perhaps fists first. Maybe their ears don't have any holes, and we need to start by making some. Please wait. Since I've said this much, let me also say, depending on what happens, I might take my little sisters and leave. You have little sisters? Arch nodded, and the other three looked at one another again. They couldn't say it, but they all felt that maybe they should force her to quit this line of work. Workers made more money than adventurers, but the catch was that the jobs could be extremely dangerous. Foresight meant choosing jobs only after making sure they were safe, but unforeseen issues cropped up all the time. If things went poorly, it was entirely possible Arch could die and leave her sisters behind. But everyone felt they shouldn't poke their noses any further into her business. I see. Well, for now at least we understand your issue. We'll leave you to solve that, but as far as whether or not to accept this job, having said that much, he cast a cold look at Arch.